The gentle breeze of that late afternoon danced through the trees as I adjusted the tools in the garden. The smell of wet earth, brought by the early morning rain, filled the air, and I felt at peace with the world. My name is Clara, and after years of a life dedicated to a calm and predictable routine, everything changed with the arrival of Raphael. When he appeared at my door, carrying a worn backpack and a shy smile, I had no idea how much his presence would transform my world. Raphael was the nephew of Eduardo, my late husband. He was looking for peace and refuge after having lived years immersed in a chaotic city, where the noise of the streets and the pressure of work no longer gave him room to breathe. What he did not know was that, by finding refuge in my house, he would also be opening doors to parts of me that I had long since closed off. At first, his presence was discreet. He spent his days taking solitary walks in the forest and reading long books on the porch, with a pensive look that seemed to seek answers in the words printed on the pages. I was used to my solitude. Eduardo had passed away a few years ago, and since then my life seemed to be torn between longing and a lack of surprises. The visits I received were always from neighbors or friends who, however well-intentioned, could not fill the void left by my husband. When Raphael arrived, there was something in his silence that brought me a strange sense of relief, as if he were adjusting to my life without forcing anything. The weeks passed, and without me realizing it, Raphael became more present. Not in an intrusive way, but with a gentleness that touched me deeply. We would start with casual conversations about the weather or the simple life we led in the countryside. But soon, the words would deepen into something more. He was genuinely curious about me, about my story, and that made me feel seen, in a way I had forgotten was possible. Little by little, he began to notice details that I had ignored, like the way the wisteria branches climbed up the facade of the house, or how summer nights made me miss Eduardo. He also shared his own stories, like memories of his childhood in the city, his frustrated dreams, and why he had left behind a promising job at a technology company. I was fascinated by his way of looking at life, by the way he saw the world without the filter of social pressures that I had so often carried. It was during a particularly hot day, when the heat was almost oppressive, that Raphael came over to help me with the garden. I was dealing with an old fence that needed to be fixed, but the pieces were loose and stubbornly refused to fit together. My hands were sweaty, and sweat ran down my forehead, but I didn't want to ask for help. I was used to dealing with things on my own, as I had always done since Eduardo's death. It was then that he appeared, silently, with only that calm smile that was already familiar to me. "Do you need help?" he asked, and his gaze reflected something deeper than a simple offer of assistance. It was a silent offer, as if he knew that behind the appearance of self-control, there was something more that I was not willing to admit. Before I could answer, he was already at my side, working without rushing, with the same calm that always accompanied him. There was something invigorating in the way he gave himself over to the moment, as if he were living each gesture with total presence. Where my husband, Eduardo, was preoccupied and lost in his thoughts, always distant, Raphael seemed to be completely in tune with the present, and I found myself absorbed in the difference between the two. Over the following days, our relationship grew stronger. Small gestures of affection, such as mutual support in daily tasks, or the exchange of meaningful glances during a silent meal, began to create a stronger bond. It was something natural, without pressure, without promises. Just a genuine connection, which was built day after day, without us having to force anything. Everything changed, however, one rainy afternoon. The rain, which had started out discreetly, turned into a torrential downpour, and we were soon trapped inside the house. The windows fogged up, and the sound of water hitting the roof created a cozy and intimate atmosphere. Not knowing what to do to occupy our time, we decided to separate some old books to donate. It was a simple activity, but at the same time full of meaning. Each book, each page turned, brought back a memory of times gone by. I, who had always tried to keep everything organized and in its proper place, realized that this small gesture of separating books for others could also be a way of freeing something inside me. As we walked through the shelves, I noticed Raphael stopping at a particular book, one that I had almost forgotten existed. It was a diary that Eduardo had kept in the early years of our marriage. Raphael looked at it curiously, and I, without knowing why, let him open it. His eyes sparkled as he flipped through the pages, and he made a light observation about Eduardo's handwriting, about the way he wrote so carefully. "He seemed to be a man of few words, but with a lot to say," Raphael commented, with a smile that seemed to reflect something more. It was when he handed me a photo of me, one from when I was young, that a different silence hung in the air. He held it carefully, looking at it intently. "You were beautiful," he said, his voice soft, but filled with something I couldn't quite identify. I looked at him, surprised, and then quickly looked away. Those words seemed more than a simple compliment. It was as if he were saying something deeper, something I hadn't said in years. That night, when he went for a walk, the emptiness of the house seemed even greater. Raphael wasn't there, but his presence seemed to have invaded every corner, as if he was already part of the house in a way I couldn't explain. His words, though so simple, reverberated in my mind, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself questioning what I really wanted for the future. When Raphael returned, the cool night air seemed to have brought a new energy. He walked through the door and, upon seeing me, asked with that same softness, "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer. It wasn't a simple question, nor a question of physical health. It was a question about my soul, about my emotions that I had buried so deep. I smiled, trying to appear calm, but deep inside, something had changed. The internal battle between the comfort of my solitary life and the attraction of a new possibility, of something different, consumed me. The relationship between us continued to grow, but always with a calm intensity. Every touch, every word, seemed to transform our relationship into something more. One afternoon, while we were organizing the last books for donation, our hands brushed against each other in an almost imperceptible way, but the shock was undeniable. A wave of electricity ran through my body, and I saw the same surprise in Raphael's eyes. He stopped, and for a second, everything hung in the air. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to do this alone." I knew he wasn't just talking about the task, but about life, about the burden I had been carrying since Eduardo's death. I had grown accustomed to the weight of loneliness, to the idea that I would be able to face everything without anyone's help. But Raphael, with his gentle words, was offering something more, the possibility of sharing this burden, of experiencing something different. Those days were like a rebirth for me. I was slowly learning to open up again. With each passing day, I felt lighter, more willing to look to the future. Raphael brought a peace into my life that I didn't know existed, and his presence made me believe that the future was not something to fear, but something that could be built with courage and confidence. The next morning, we decided to walk through the forest. The morning was cool, and the scent of wet leaves mingled with the clean air. The walk was silent but comfortable. We reached a clearing, where the sun gently penetrated the trees. It was there that Raphael, with his eyes full of sincerity, said to me, "Clara, I don't know where this path leads, but I know that I don't want to walk it without you." His eyes were deep and vulnerable, and those words touched something inside me. I didn't have all the answers, but at that moment, I realized that maybe I didn't need them. The truth was that by his side, I could allow myself to believe in something bigger, more beautiful. I intertwined my hand with his, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that the future was before me, open and full of possibilities. The weeks that followed were a new beginning. Together, we discovered that life is made up of small shared moments, of the courage to embrace the unknown, and of allowing yourself to experience something that once seemed impossible. As the sun set on one of our evenings on the porch, with renewed warmth in my heart, I realized that the past was still a part of me, but no longer as a burden. It had become a part of who I am, a story that I now carried with pride. And so, my life continued on its course. Peace and hope settled in again, and for the first time, I knew that it is never too late to find something good, something true. And that something I realized was the love, courage, and hope that never fades.